All right. Thank you everyone to the story map. Thank you everyone for joining us in the story mapping breakout room. Our first speaker is Rhonda Holberton. She's an assistant professor for digital media arts. Rhonda's multimedia installations make use of digital and interactive technologies integrated into traditional methods of art production. Her research projects focus on technology's impacts on deep time, have been funded by the Knight Foundation, the National Endowment for the Arts, and Cal Humanities. Her artwork has been exhibited at RMIT Gallery, Melbourne, Australia. I'm probably not going to pronounce all these things right, but Lebec Residences d'Artistes Les Tours de Paris, Switzerland, Fifi Projects in Mexico City, and the San Francisco Museum of Art. And Rhonda, please correct me if I, really mess those up. But thank you, Rhonda, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Christina, and thanks for the invitation. Really excited about all of the presentations today. So I'm going to start out by sharing my screen. So while my personal practice is definitely rooted in what would be considered fine art, a lot of the projects that I've been getting up to at San Jose State take some of the kind of tech skills that I've brought into my artistic practice and then kind of flip them around into community or student-facing projects. So what I'm going to talk about today is a collaboration. My co-PI, Revathi Krishnaswamy, who's in the Department of English and Comparative Literature here at San Jose State. We put together a proposal for a story map. We've been working around themes of digital humanities and also something we were calling deep humanities, the idea that kind of thinking about deep time and deep technology and applying some of those long-term kind of and multinodal strategies to thinking about the humanities process. So I'm going to talk over this video and then I'll kind of start explaining it a little bit. Or maybe I'll just explain it now. So the story map was a user contributed map. So what we did was we built kind of an infrastructure and a back end to produce the map you see here. We also hosted some student facing creative workshops and also public facing creative workshops, both visual arts and around creative languages. And what we did was ask for user submissions to the San Jose Story Map. So I'll talk a little bit on the front end about how we built this thing and the players involved. And then I'll kind of pull back a little bit and start taking a look at not just the kind of technical components, but some of the social components that went into building this map. And I think one of the things that came out of the last session that in the Q&A was around both preservation strategies, but also thinking about deep humanities is not necessarily a technical problem, even though we kind of preface with digital, that the deep humanities is kind of a challenge or an opportunity, but it's a people opportunity. All right, so I'm gonna start out by acknowledging the team, which I was so happy to hear Pam talk about in the original or the previous session. So it was a huge team, and one of our members is not included. So another MFA student, Catherine, who I will acknowledge, but was not on my website to screen grab. So Revathi and I co-produced the project, but really kind of sat behind as administrators and kind of advisors. Produced a lot of tools, but then it was the students that we were working with who ended up doing a lot of the kind of front end legwork, but also a lot of the technical development. So this was a project that was funded by a couple different funding streams. Cal Humanities supported the kind of construction of the map and some of the workshops. And then we had some internal grants at San Jose State as a part of the H&A and action funding mechanism. So these were funded public facing, some of the more public facing and student facing creative workshops, an exhibition that I'll talk about a little bit later. And then the second round of funding to produce some public-facing workshops within the city of San Jose from Abierto. And so those funding mechanisms allowed us to pay our student workers, which is a really important part of this project, that they got both the kind of portfolio opportunities that came from it, but also that they were being funded through it. So this project, because it was community driven in terms of the submission content, was really important that we had partners within the community. So the MLK Library, Chopsticks Alley, San Jose Museum of Art, School of Visual Philosophy, Montalvo Art Center, and the Thompson Art Gallery. So let me kind of go back. I wanted to, some numbers here, but let me also kind of just talk about why we were building this and some of, the conceptual conceits behind it. We wanted to push back against the idea that Silicon Valley and by extension San Jose is a monolith culturally, and also like what does it mean when we kind of talk about San Jose and Silicon Valley. So we were trying to tell a little bit more of like a people's narrative and use a map, something that kind of had some scrolling features that you saw in the video that we're used to in social media, but attach some of those scrolling features and those contributions to a geographic location, to the people that actually lived in the city, and provide an alternative, maybe narrative about who lives in San Jose and what they care about. So we accepted contributions. We ended up running 3 public events, 6 student-facing workshops with 98 students. We ended up with 65 submissions to the contest itself. We came up with 4 winners and 4 honorable mentions. I'm gonna maybe come back to the tech in just a second. But we were, in terms of the submissions, we accepted video, we accepted audio, we accepted still images, text-based. So we were really trying to be as inclusive as we possibly could and thinking about the types of expression and media and the way that expression takes form within the community. And we worked with the public library to translate the submission form into the most kind of used languages within San Jose. We know it's a very diverse community, so that was also really important to us. All right, so kind of on the back end, one of the things that I did when I talk about creating tools that I then kind of give over to my students, I created a list of, did some research and created a list of technical platforms that we could use to create the map itself. And then I gave this list essentially to one of my students with a spreadsheet and asked her to start doing some research, like look into these things. And I provided these columns for, to start pointing towards some things that we would want to be thinking about, both in terms of development of the project, but kind of long-term thinking and archival thinking. But really handed the decision in terms of what platform we were going to use over to the students. So this is somebody that I had in classes for 2 years. So I had a trusting relationship with. But one of the things that I really wanted to do was kind of give some, I think in courses we're really used to kind of this top-down model or things being a little bit more prescribed. So I wanted to allow the students to have some agency in this project. So we ended up hosting, the live website is still hosted on GitHub with their kind of public-facing URL, but it's running off of this repo right here. So we ended up using Mapbox.js because it was, again, thinking about archivalness, it needed the least amount of infrastructure in between, the user experience and then the design experience. So it felt like it could be as open as possible, and it could be, once we have this system built, it could be deployed for a couple different types of mapping exercises. And there's a few other projects in San Jose that Kathy Harris, who spoke in the last session, and I have been discussing about kind of putting under this umbrella in the San Jose story map. So like I mentioned, the community partners were super important. We can build, we can build the platform, but because we got the grant right before COVID hit, it ended up, we had to pivot. We couldn't do as many things in person. So we really relied on our community partners to help get the word out to their communities, and then ran a lot of the workshops online for the first year. We also relied on partners within San Jose State. So this is the Thompson Gallery. One of the kind of satellite projects that we envisioned around this to generate user contribution was the creation of postcards. And that's what we would be doing primarily in our public facing workshops. It's a small enough format that people could kind of feel like they could produce something useful, meaningful, but also would fit beautifully within, a submission format for the story map. So the Thompson Gallery ran a separate contest with the student submitted postcard designs that were automatically then entered into the San Jose Story Map contest. And there was an exhibition of the student postcards along with some other kind of community facing work in an exhibition at the gallery on campus called New Kinships that was organized by Rula and Elena Tazade from the Thompson Gallery. This was at the San Jose Museum of Art. We reached out to community artists. Sally Ashton, who's a poet and a writer, ran a few workshops here, and some, were student or like adult facing, but a lot of the workshops could be incorporated for community, like youth in the community as well. We had Irene Carvajal had a paleotoric cart, so that she converted an ice cream cart into a kind of a mobile silk screening station. And we had a few other workshops. I won't kind of get into those too deeply. And then we ran a few of our writing workshops at Montalvo Arts Center as well. So trying to reach out, in multiple formats to the community for submission. The website also became, as we moved in during COVID into an online environment, a really important part for communicating about the project and what it was and what it was trying to do. And then we also started using some, digital tools to reach community, things like Eventbrite, our on-campus calendar system. So this is in spring of 2020. Yeah, fall of 2020. Here we go. There's the dates. Fall of 2020. We ran 6 creative workshops, and those were hosted by faculty, interdisciplinary faculty from throughout the university, as well as an external presenter, Jaime Yen, who had a mapping Zoom space that kind of focused on placemaking in Zoom, because so much, obviously still now is kind of happening over Zoom. So these were creative workshops that produced things like the display of the postcards that was designed and built by students in the design department at San Jose State under Cohar Scott's direction. My colleague in the art department, Robin Lasser, ran a visual arts kind of photography workshop around like waterways within the community. Diane Lee in the design department ran a workshop about like public vernacular through hand painted signs within the region. I ran a 3D scanning workshop, and then Carrie Romer in geography ran an ArcGIS workshop where we utilized their story mapping features to kind of just prototype what a story map could look like. They were all, because it was all on Zoom, we were able to record the session. So we also had a YouTube playlist, so folks who were unable to attend the live sessions could go back and rewatch and gain skills that they could then deploy for their submissions for the San Jose Story Map. I'll kind of move through these. So they give you kind of a sense for like the visuals of what these things ended up looking like. And then the exhibition itself. So these are some of the submitted and postcard designs from the students, which spanned a wide variety of genres and kind of materials and tools. And during a time when we were all kind of, isolated and stuck, the idea was that both the story map itself, but as well as the postcards, could kind of sit on top of where we existed in space and become a connective tissue, a kind of mobile art gallery or more mobile exhibition of creative works, put it that way. So I think that this is kind of as much as I wanted to present for today, but I'm happy to kind of circle back around after my colleague presents or answer any questions you all have right now. Thank you. I'm really proud of the contributions from the students from the community, and it was such a wonderful way to engage a geographic reality when we were feeling, when at the time I was feeling really removed. I mean, that was not necessarily a part of the conception of the project, but it certainly became a huge part of it as we started moving along.
Yeah, this is great, Rhonda. I also put your website and your Instagram in the chat in case people want to contact you more. We do have a few minutes for questions if people want to talk more with Rhonda about this right now. This is like an amazing project. I love this project.
Thank you, Christina. It's big, and I know I kind of did one of those like talk real fast with a lot of content. So happy to circle back to any questions that might arise.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can go ahead and have Sureshi show, have her lightning talk. And if you are able to share your screen, that would be great. And then we can do questions and discussion at the end also. All right, awesome. Thank you so much. So our next speaker is Sureshi Jayawardene. She's an associate professor of Africana Studies. She received her PhD in African American Studies from Northwestern University, and now is an Africana social scientist specializing in Western Indian Ocean African diaspora. Her research and teaching interests include Africana geographies and epistemologies, diaspora, memory, expressive cultures, spirituality, Africana families, and kinship formation, Black digital humanities, and research methods. She is currently working on a book combining ethnography, interviews, archival research, and content analysis with theories of diaspora, Pan-Africanism, Black geographies, and Africana aesthetics to culturally situate her investigation into conceptions of selfhood and community among people of African descent in Sri Lanka. Jayawardene is also a co-founder and currently co-directs the Afrometrics Research Institute. Thank you so much for speaking today, and I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you, Christina. I want to start by thanking you and Pam for the invitation to participate in this really great event over the next 2 days. And what I'm going to talk about today is really a little experiment that I did in my Black Urban Experience class, which is, it's an upper division Africana Studies class. It's an elective. It also kind of fulfills GE requirements. So there's students from across the university enrolling for the course. And I actually was assigned to teach this class when I first got to San Diego State about 4.5 years ago. And looking at the way that it had been taught in the years prior, it just seemed kind of boring. And I hate to say that, but it was just this course about urban space and placemaking and naming and kind of all these activities that Black people have been engaging in over time through movement, whether it was kind of forced or voluntary movement. And then students were asked to write this long 20-page paper at the end of the course. And I just thought, I really don't want to have students do this. What can I do that would be interesting to students? What can I do that would kind of put them in a place where they're thinking about their own creativity and thinking kind of outside of the box and being really imaginative about how to narrate stories about the Black urban experience. And so I'd reached out to Pam and the DH Center at SDSU and said, hey, I kind of want to do a story mapping assignment for this course. I'm a new faculty member, and I'm trying to find out if you all can support me in kind of helping students figure out or learn the tools, the software, and then really just kind of offering some support as they develop their projects. And Pam was like, it's great that you reached out to us, but we don't really know too much about the story mapping tool that you're trying to use. And I was trying to use the ArcGIS tool. And at the time, it wasn't the most user-friendly tool, but it was still pretty useful and pretty straightforward for just the average person with no GIS skills, mapping skills, right? And so that's kind of where I started. But at the same time, I didn't just want to take a course and just kind of throw or like just add DH assignments or tools on top of this very traditionally taught course. I wanted it to have this integrated kind of approach where students were thinking about digital spaces, digital visualizations, how stories could be told in digital ways, but without necessarily taking away from traditional storytelling. And so Pam actually put me in touch with the Department of Geography at San Diego State, who happened to have like the institutional subscription to all things ArcGIS. And they were able to help me work through getting my account set up. Excuse me, I'm recovering from a really nasty cold and cough. So I may have to do that a few more times. Sorry about that. One of the other things that I had to do was to kind of look at my field, my discipline, Africana Studies, to see where the conversations around DH had been. And there's a lot of scholarship coming out of sort of Black scholars, not necessarily in Black studies or Africana studies, trying to engage with DH and talking about Black DH as like the intersection of Black studies and DH. But to me, knowing the history of the discipline and knowing that way back in the late 60s, folks who were designing the early curriculum for Africana studies really imagined science and tech to be the central part of the core curriculum, just like the social sciences or humanities would be. And so I kind of had to start there and build out this course in a way that took into consideration teaching in Africana studies, the uniqueness of teaching practices, DH history, kind of the ways in which Africana studies had historically engaged science and tech, and then also this emergent area of Black DH. So my little experiment in this class kind of stands at the intersection of all three of these things. Let's see. So the course kind of goes, let me just go a little bit through like why I advocate for an Africana DH. I see the discipline as sort of a meta discipline that has several subfields, sub areas of focus. And so just like you would have psychology and religion and political science and literature and history, I think digital humanities has a space that can be carved out. It's just not, at this point, 50 some years since the formalization of Black studies, it's just not something that has been fully kind of developed. And to me, this experiment was an opportunity to kind of explore the possibilities of developing that. So just a little timeline of kind of Black studies history with DH. So in 1969, Nathan Hare, he develops the first kind of curriculum, core curriculum for Black studies, and imagines a science and tech track alongside humanities and social sciences. In 1974, there's a special issue in the Black Scholar on Black science. And there's folks talking about a whole range of things beyond just teaching students Black science content, but like really trying to connect anything to do with science and tech and computing with policy changes and how those things can kind of translate into real solutions in the community. Let's see. And then you skip a couple decades and there is this one article or chapter in the African American Studies Reader about science and tech for kind of advancing policy outcomes. And then the 2000s. So there's like these chunks of time where there's not a lot going on in this history. But since the 2000s, we have eBlack Studies, which is a website where there's a lot of community resources to learn how to teach Black studies, different kind of projects within Black studies. There's a journal, a dedicated journal that's open access that is entirely online. And then more recently, iBlack Studies, which is kind of a more up-to-date and more user-friendly version of an interactive version of what eBlack Studies started out to be. So here's Kim Gallen, who's kind of a pioneer in the area of Black digital humanities, where she's really coming at it from the perspective of Black studies and DH as an intersection, and kind of thinking about transforming this concept into a reality where it gives language to the work of Black folks in DH, both in and outside of the academy. And so to me, the experiment that I embarked upon really kind of extends that in both directions, where I wanted to really dig deep into the discipline's history with this area, but also to think about, if I was going to teach this course in a way that I introduce my students to DH, how can it be done in a way that's congruent with how we teach in Africana studies? So that's kind of where I started. Let me see. So these are some of the questions that I asked going into this. How does Africana DH show up in theoretically sound, rigorous, and meaningful ways that are in keeping with the discipline's threefold mission? How is Africana DH mobilized in the classroom towards the optimal benefit and utility of our students? And how does Africana DH pedagogy shape both collaboration and creativity in the classroom? Because I didn't want to kind of focus only on, again, just kind of throwing DH at students, but really being thoughtful about integrating it throughout a 16-week semester. And then also thinking about what does it take to teach Africana DH that might be different or somehow more amplified than teaching without a DH inflection. So I'm going to show you some of the student projects, but basically what ends up happening is I have students work on a final project where they have to combine research, narrative, mapping, and digital media to highlight a Black urban experience of their choice. So they can choose any kind of US city that would be considered an urban space where there has been both a historic and contemporary presence of Black people and contribution of Black people. Pardon me for just a second. Thank you. And the way that I wanted to think about this project was like, it's a 400 level class. I need them to do some research. So the project itself is broken up into smaller chunks that they work on throughout the semester. So that required kind of working backwards and thinking about, what does that mean for the whole of my syllabus, the whole of my course, and the whole of like all of the forms of assessment, right? So starting with student learning outcomes, that tie both content, theory, and DH tools together. And so those are just a couple of the student learning outcomes in the syllabus. So they also, as we explore different types of topics, so like we start with the Great Migration, that's kind of the main, if you had to pick like a topic that we start with, that's where we start. They look at DH projects that are about the Great Migration. So in addition to the readings and maybe like a podcast episode or some kind of media, they're also looking at DH projects dedicated to the Great Migration. I also start with toolbox units way before we jump into the Great Migration, where the first couple of weeks we're talking about conceptual approaches to the topic of the Black urban experience. We talk about sort of geographic themes and concepts, sociological themes and concepts, some sorts of theories that help kind of shape how they're going to approach the next weeks. And then this is the final project. So it's very scaffolded. In like week 4, they have to pick the city that they want to focus their work on. They have to, the next thing that they have to do is an annotated bibliography. And I walk them through how to do that. Because that to me helps fulfill that research component where if they were going to be writing a paper, they'd still have to do some kind of searching on the library webpage to find sources and things like that. So I specify the number of sources and how many of those sources need to be academic sources, and then give them a sample annotated bibliography, because most students, even at that 400 level, have not ever written an annotated bibliography. So providing some help with that. And then we do a number of story maps tutorials. The first time I taught the course, I had people, I had somebody from geography, the Department of Geography, come in and do a demo of the story maps application through ArcGIS, and then but now I do it myself because it's been updated. It's really easy to kind of navigate, and then I integrate work days where there's dedicated time in class for students to work on their projects. We take over a lab space. They get to like spend the 15-minute class period on the computer working on their materials, ask questions. You know, I get to troubleshoot with them. And then they create the story map themselves. The last 2 things they do is I can exhibit, and we do this at the DH Center, where Pam has all these wonderful screens that students can display their work on, and we just kind of walk around hearing from students about their project. And then I do a self-evaluation where they can tell me what things, you know, what things worked and what things didn't. I do want to show you, in the last couple minutes of my time, I want to show you some projects of students. Can everybody see this okay? So this student picked Detroit, and I can drop these links in the chat too. And so some students get really, really excited with the tool and will, like, as you can see here, like create their own maps and hide things. Whereas others will just, you know, just kind of upload a map. Since the first time teaching this class, I have asked students to create an express map in story maps, which is really simple to do. And again, I do tutorials with them for how to do it. But this class is one of my most popular classes, and there's always lots and lots of students waiting to get in. they love that they're, it's intimidating at first to have to use a tool that nobody knows, nobody's used before. And let me just move on to the next one. But at the end of the semester, everyone's just really happy to have learned something new, both in the digital tool sense, but also in learning how to display information in a way that kind of stands outside of the norm, especially for a college class. For some of the the exhibits at the DH Center, I've had students kind of embed like a QR code that if you scan it as you're walking by, it takes you to like a YouTube playlist from the city that or the time period that they're trying to highlight. So students get really, really creative how to present this. And I think I'll stop here and I can share the links to the student projects in the chat.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jayawardene. Thank you actually for speaking to us while you don't feel very well. I'm sorry about that. And also, I know you're planning the 50th anniversary of the Africana Studies Department at San Diego State, right?
Yeah, that's coming up this weekend. So it's a crazy week for me.
Well, thank you so much. We do have about 3 minutes remaining, as many of you probably see in the message there. If we have questions for Dr. Holberton or Dr. Jayawardene, we will take those now. Wanted to say too, those projects look great. Maybe I can start off by, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, so the tech buy-in, for ArcGIS, there is a little, if you're not familiar with the software or mapping strategies in general. So how, you might have talked about it, but I was thinking and looking at the beautiful slide. So how do you approach integrating something that is kind of tech challenging with like broad historical and cultural thinking, right? So I think that in digital humanities, it's frequently that challenge, like you have to kind of incorporate engineer brain, but also pull back and do something quite different.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it helps to like, the scaffolding part really helps so that it's not this final project that students are just kind of intimidated by throughout the semester, right? And it's like, okay, these are the different pieces that kind of help to get you there. And so one of the things I do is with the work days, like we break down some of the more technical parts of the story maps tool. And since we used it for the first time in 2018 and last year, it's so much better. I don't know how much you use the ArcGIS story maps, but like it's so much more user friendly for someone who has no skills. And then we also work with Pam Lack in the DH Center. And she actually meets one-on-one with students as well to give them kind of more, kind of one-on-one FaceTime to help work through some of those technical difficulties. And we spend time at the DH Center. I go over how to differently use story maps for the different formats, the different kind of templates, the different kind of tips and hacks. And so one thing that I encourage students to do is like gather all your media and store it in a Google Drive folder so that you have it all in one place. Write out the narrative in a Google Doc so that when it comes time to compiling everything in story maps, all you're doing is really uploading media and copying and pasting rather than trying to, like type everything out and then find the media to go with it. So we do a lot of that, and it's my approach to it has improved every time I've taught the course and done the assignment because I see kind of the blind spots and like what the students need. So hopefully that answers a little bit of your question.
Christina, do we have time for a follow-up? Or maybe we'll do it later in conversation.
Yeah, we're
Maybe later.
supposed to leave now, but certainly in the main room, we can answer some more questions. Thank you.